when we see people suffering abuse, we tend to prioritize and think that someone suffering physical abuse is suffering more than someone who is suffering emotional abuse. And that is not always the case. That is not always the case. So we cannot really compare everyone. Every human being, every individual has a unique, perfectly valid experience of abuse.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Nourished Inside Out. I am here with Martha today. She is a psychologist who specializes in trauma and attachment, and she also has a background as a military veteran. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Aneta. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
Do you mind telling us a little bit about your background and how you got started as a psychologist?
I guess like every other helper or anyone in the mental health profession or let's say mental health psychologist, therapist, we always end up here because of a personal story of, not having a great time, probably during childhood or teenage years or early adulthood. I myself developed this constant need to figure out like problems and solutions and helping people. I always identified as a helper. Growing up, even at school, I would always choose the activities that were related to volunteering and community and helping people and the elderly and going here and there and beach cleanups. And it was always my obsession to always helping the community and people. And I, I always knew that I had that kind of social aspect to me that was drawn to the human psyche, to the human, the experience of being human. And growing up, I think every summer, because we needed the credits for uni, well, you have to do some volunteering activities, and some people would probably choose the least tiring activities. And I would always go and volunteer with very challenging like populations and marginalized or excluded people, or I would always find myself like choosing the most out of all the list of places that we could go and volunteer. I would always choose the hard ones, and I was always finding this like challenges quite rewarding to me to be with highly challenging people and issues and problems and situations. And I grew into that. I grew and I found a lot of satisfaction in helping and in building community. And I guess at some point, psychology just felt very natural. It was never an option to not study psychology. It just happened very, very organic, very naturally to me. And at some point, yes, I did join the Navy when I was 18. Need a little break from school, and normally some normal people would go on a gap year and travel. And then what did I do? I just enrolled in the army for 4 years, which was hard, obviously. So when my contract finished after 4 years, I decided, well, this is the moment now to go and pursue what I've always wanted. And now with even more reason to go into this career path, because when I finished those 4 years, I was absolutely like destroyed. I was actually diagnosed with PTSD myself, so I needed to undergo therapy myself. At the same time, I was in college to become a therapist. So I guess it all happened kind of naturally and kind of pieced together organically. And here I am 10, 15 years later, fully licensed psychologist with a story of trauma and treating people with the same issues or similar issues to grow. And it's mostly post-traumatic growth, what I do with people. Life after trauma, it can be completely like meaningful and joyful and happy, and it can. And I am the living example of that.
Well, thank you for sharing your story and how you started the psychology route from starting all the way as enrolling in the military all the way to taking those challenges and struggles and finding purpose within. Something that I really wanted to talk about today was the difference between physical and emotional abuse. Can you tell us a little bit of the difference of the two?
So emotional, well, I would say someone who suffered from physical abuse, normally they would have suffered from emotional abuse as well. Like it's quite rare that someone would be in an environment where they're suffering physical abuse and they're not suffering emotional abuse. So they normally go together. But someone who is suffering emotional abuse doesn't necessarily have to be suffering physical abuse, but normally someone who's showing signs of physical abuse are most likely suffering emotional as well. Emotional abuse, we would be talking about anything that is manipulation, condescending treatment, belittling, gaslighting, controlling, verbal abuse, threats, even humiliation, laughing at you, at your choices, intimidation, questioning your life choices, questioning your life, and physical abuse. Well, we would be talking about just the physical force on someone, causing harm, causing injuries, bruises. Sometimes it's not visible, but emotional abuse is a long list of things. Like we can all identify physical abuse, like when we see it, right? If we see someone punching someone else or pushing someone or breaking someone's leg, it's very clear and we can see that. And this is one of the reasons why it's hard to recognize when it's someone is under emotional abuse, because it's more difficult to see. And physical abuse is something that we can all recognize. And emotional abuse can look like many, many, many things, like hundreds of things.
What are some early signs of emotional abuse or some things that people experience as been a victim of an emotional abuse that we don't see?
Because emotional abuse is very hard to see. Like there's no visible signs. It's hard to prove. Unless you're very close to the person, I think is quite hard. Or you're a trained therapist or someone like a social worker, someone who is in the direct environment of this person. I think it is quite hard to detect emotional abuse, especially at the very beginning when the signs can be very subtle. And because there's no visible signs, that this is the problem with emotional abuse, right? That it's when we see someone who's been through physical abuse and they have bruises and scars and a black eye, right? This is all very easy to see. I think it's very important this is why like having social networks and support networks around is always like the most important thing, because like someone can be going through emotional abuse and nobody around can even notice. So some signs could be something's very subtle, like randomly crying because they feel out of control, or something so tiny, for example, that normally someone would handle um okay, like a minor stressor. They would just, for example, like burst out crying because like they're pushing through so much pain and trying to kind of keep the peace and sometimes protect their abuser, trying to keep everything behind closed doors. They're kind of the best example of this visual example. I don't know if someone might have seen this in some video on Reels or TikTok, is this, right? This ball that you're trying to keep under the water, and then at some point you cannot keep it any longer and they will just kind of blow in your face. So people who are suffering emotional abuse, they're pushing down a whole lot that we cannot see. Normally there's no visible signs, and unless you're trained to see these things, it's quite hard. But one of these signs could be that they burst out crying or yelling or have a disproportionate reaction to something that would look minor, like if they're moms, for example, and their kids throw a little tantrum, which would be something that they would deal with it okay-ish, like, losing control over that situation or feeling overly emotional or crying uncontrollably. And they might say that they don't know why they're crying. They don't know why they feel like this, feeling completely like disconnected and out of control. Could be a sign, could indicate that the person is going through a lot and pushing down a lot. So there's only too much you can hide, right? Until it comes up to the surface. I don't know if that makes sense, or I'm getting my point across with this.
Uh, I really like the example that you used of the ball underwater, like when you're trying to push it underwater. I think that's similar to when we try to hide our emotions in situations like that. It's like you just push, and then eventually, like you said, they just blow up in your face and it jumps out. I really like the example.
Yeah, and you can only go for so long pushing down emotions before they blow up in your face. And I think it would be about keeping an eye on people. Like if you suspect that someone might be under emotional abuse, and keeping an eye on them and how they handle daily stresses and day to day normal average things. And sometimes it might just snap at something or completely lose their shine out of nowhere, that might be an indicator that they are just too overwhelmed and their nervous system, their brains, their bodies, they don't have the window of tolerance to keep pushing anything else because they're completely collapsed and overwhelmed. Yeah, that could be a sign. But other than that, I think it's quite difficult unless you're trained to see these signs. They're quite subtle. And I'd say, well, if you suspect that someone might be under something like this, talking to them directly because they might never show this. They might never talk about it. They're pushing and pushing and pushing.
How does emotional abuse affect a person's mental and emotional well being over time?
So it definitely messes up with everything. So from your self esteem to your difficulty for trusting others, maintaining relationships. So obviously abuse, both physical and emotional, both of them can lead to trauma, PTSD, and it does distort your perception of safety and trust and your perception of reality. So these could lead to in the future having low self-esteem, anxiety, depression. A lot I see in therapy is difficulty trusting others because their sense of safety is completely hijacked, completely broken. Maintaining relationships, being intimate with someone, trusting someone, opening up, being vulnerable with someone, that might be very challenging in the future for someone who's been through emotional abuse because like all they believed that it was safe and reliable was not all of a sudden, or their perception of reality was completely like destroyed and distorted and hijacked. So to be able to trust again and to build intimacy in the future is quite difficult. So this is one of the effects long term of abuse, either physical and emotional. Then they can also feel chronic feelings of unworthiness, lack of identity, self doubt, like they can feel empty and like a huge void and they don't know what, they are. These kind of relationships and environments, their identity, the sense of self and identity has been also hijacked. So over time, they need to build this back up because, again, it distorts absolutely everything around you, your perception of the world, others, and yourself. Mhm.
What are some things that you recommend for clients that come to you that are victims of emotional abuse? What are some things that you recommend for them to apply into their relationship, whether it's meditation, yoga, finding a supportive community?
Yeah. So the most important thing is that they need to have support. It's the main thing. I will never get tired of saying this to absolutely every client I see, even if they're going to them like the tiniest or smallest signs of abuse or at the very beginning of sometimes not even abuse, but just an unhealthy relationship. Like, please don't isolate, never be alone, find support, find a community, never fall out of the radar completely, never isolate, never not respond to your friends, never choose to not communicate what you're going through. So, this is something that I'm always very annoying about. Like, communicate, please. Always reach out. They might feel like a burden, like, what am I going to say? Like, I deserve this. I'm allowing this. I am accepting this behavior. So, what am I going to complain about? What's the point of reaching out? They're probably even going to blame me for being in this situation. But it's been proven time and time again that two people going through the same experience, for example, let's say they're going through the absolute same experience, both people. One has a solid support system and the other doesn't. The one that doesn't have a solid support system is highly, highly more likely of developing some sort of post traumatic stress disorder or any sort of trauma related symptoms than the other person. Like, we do need to remind them to communicate, to never isolate, and to open up about what they're going through. They might be surprised of the support they receive. Sometimes they don't do it out of fear of being a burden, but then sometimes they are also surprised that when they share their experience, they receive support. And yeah, so my advice would be yes, reach out, never isolate. Because sometimes, yeah, it's like I will respond like tomorrow or like, when I have time. And and I never, I don't know what to say. And like, it's been a week now. It's awkward to respond. So they tend to like kind of fall out the radar eventually. And also if they're in a relationship that is also manipulative, they've probably been manipulated into losing some friendships as well and not talking to people. So it's quite easy that when they want to reach out for help, it's difficult to do so.
Yeah, I think a lot of times for somebody who doesn't want to reach out to friends or family or another community, a lot of feelings that can come with it are shame or
Yeah.
embarrassment. Do you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think as a society, we need to be better. Absolutely, 100%. Be better at not blaming victims for what they go through and creating safe spaces for them to open up and communicate. Because the moment we shame them or embarrass them or kind of blame them for what they're going through, then of course they're not going to reach out. Like, it makes sense that they don't reach out. If the first thing they find is a finger pointing at them, of course they're not going to reach out. So it's understandable, this feeling of shame and guilt that they feel. And I can fully understand that. I would say, even if some people don't understand you when you open up, keep reaching out. Different people. Even if that one friend doesn't understand, reach out to another friend. If they do, reach out to someone else. Don't shut down because a couple of people um, didn't validate your experience, which is very hard. It's very hard to open up and not have your experience validated. But don't stop reaching out just because a couple of people didn't do well. And we have to do better as a society. We do. But keep reaching out until you find something, until you find someone who's going to help you or listen to you, or open up a space for you to talk and provide support. So reach out, always reach out.
Always reach out. I like that. What are some common examples of emotional abuse that people might not recognize?
I think it's overlooked. It's kind of, I see that a lot in relationships. I see many women in therapy with seemingly normal boyfriends and relationships that talk about experiences that are normal for them, and they talk about constant criticism, for example, or verbal abuse. And it's like, no, but it's okay because, the food that day wasn't great. So I understand that he criticized my cooking, or, yeah, this skirt didn't really look good on me. So it's normal that he, made a mean comment about it. I'm just giving examples, right? It's this constant criticism, for example. I think a lot of women in therapy, they're super used to it. It's something that, it is a massive red flag. It is an example of emotional abuse to be constantly criticized or questioned. That is one big one that we should look for. And sometimes criticism doesn't have to be about like big things in life. Could be about like the way you dress, your appearance, the way you talk. Like, you should be more polite, or you should be more feminine, or like, it's this little things that are overlooked and seen as normal, but it becomes constant, and it just goes like hidden under the surface. And many, many, many women just, they completely ignore and dismiss constant criticism from your partner or someone in your family. That is a red flag. That is emotional abuse. Don't ignore it. Insults, of course, if he's calling you a slut, a whore, all of these things. Like, I've seen in this in therapy time and time again, they receive these words from their partners, and they still think it's okay-ish because maybe they deserved it. Maybe they also did something wrong. They kind of deserved it. It's never okay to be called a horse, ladder, any of these words, any of these big words. So that criticism, insults, verbal abuse, look out for that. Something very subtle as well could be when they isolate you from friends. So they start making comments about your friends, and it's very subtle. It doesn't happen overnight. But like, I don't like this friend of yours, or like, look at the way she looked at me when we went out that night, and I don't really like the way that she handled this. And they're kind of like trying to interfere between you and your relationships as well, trying to cut ties, trying to erode the relationship, the trust. They're probably talking shit about them. And if they have the chance, they might do the same with them about you. Like they're trying to create this conflict between you to isolate. Once you're isolated, as I was saying, connection is the most important thing when you're going through this. Once you're isolated, it's very easy to keep you in this relationship. So, isolation, or if you ever see a sign that he's having a very strong opinion about any of your friends, that is also a red flag. Or your family, he's got a very strong opinion about your mom, about your dad, about your brother, your sister, your cousin. That is a massive red flag. Like, this is not his place to have an opinion like this about your family or your best friends, unless there's clear signs. Like, if you can sit with yourself and be completely honest with yourself and see that, well, there's clear signs that this person is an absolute dickhead. Sorry about the word. And yeah, my boyfriend is like kind of making me reflect on that. Okay, when it's constant, and you have to look out for this, when it's constant comments about people in your life, and I don't like this person, I don't like that person, and it's subtle, that is emotional abuse, and that is happening. Invalidating your feelings as well. Anything that you want to talk about, and he goes, here we are again. You're always talking about this, or always at the same conversation, or that never happened, or I never said that. So anything gaslighting, invalidating, questioning how you feel. And another big thing could be controlling finances. It doesn't happen to everybody, but it can happen as well. Controlling your finances, like where you spend your money and why did you spend your money on this? Why did you need to buy this? How much money did you spend this month? And trying to control your finances or your actions, your appearance as well, your clothes. All of those. I think there would be more, but all of those would be like the main ones for me, in my opinion, of emotional abuse.
Those are really great pointers to point out because, like you said, they're little things that they're easily overlooked. So the little comments, the little snarky comment here, snarky comment there, but they're very overlooked. So thank you for sharing those and to help us be more aware of them.
Yeah.
Jumping over to physical abuse, what are the typical signs of physical abuse that people should look out for?
We would normally see unexplained bruises that they try to justify with very weird explanations, like I fell on my bike, or I was going down the stairs, and I was doing laundry and I didn't see the floor and I tripped on something. And they would always provide this like very unrealistic explanations of why things happened, unless they really, really trust you, and they can't confess and they feel safe to confess. I've seen this. And so someone who was completely bruised everywhere, they would give you explanations about how they, this one happened and that one happened and this one happened. And it was never plausible that these things happened in that way. So they would always try it and justify the bruises or the injuries. They also have like frequent accidents. They would always be talking about how they fell down the stairs, or they tripped on something, or they slammed their hand on a door, or things like that. Like, we have to pay attention to these things because it's common and constant. And if it becomes common and constant, then it's definitely a red flag, like a massive sign to look out for in someone. It might indicate that they are suffering physical abuse. Another thing would be that they flinch or try to avoid physical contact, for example. So they might not say no altogether, but they might flinch when someone touches them or try to hug them, or they can become over time quite reactive or sensitive to physical touch. So this is something also to look out for if you're about to touch someone, like hug someone, not a complete stranger, obviously, in the street, but a friend or someone that you've known, and you're reaching out for them and they flinch when you're about to touch them, or they're quite reluctant to be into any sort of physical touch or intimacy, then that could also indicate that they feel uncomfortable with the proximity, the intimacy, or they might be bruised as well and they're trying to avoid contact. This might not be as usual, but it does happen.
How does physical abuse affect a person's sense of safety and self worth?
it distorts your perception of safety and reality, right? The moment your perception of safety is distorted because you cannot be safe even at home with the person that you should be trusting the most, there's this inner sense of loss of safety and control in your life that can lead to this constant fear and hypervigilance and trauma responses. And the minor, like the smallest thing could feel like a threat, like a noise or something falling. You see this with trauma survivors when they've been through this kind of abuse. They would flinch at sounds or movements, sudden movements or sudden things happening around them, things that could be like quite minor to everybody else. This is obviously coming from hypervigilance and fear, obviously, as a result of having their sense of safety and control completely lost and distorted.
A lot of times people think that physical abuse is more severe than emotional abuse. Do you agree with that, or do you think they're equally damaging? What's your take on it?
I think they're equally, I mean, they could be equally damaging, and depending on the case, could be one or the other, could be more damaging. And it's the thing is, we as a society, we see everything that's physical more severe in the same way that when someone breaks a leg, we would never say like, okay, try to heal on your own and try this flowers or these essential oils. But when someone is struggling with their mental health, they have anxiety or depression, we do go into that kind of minimizing their symptoms and offering advice and have you tried this hypnosis or that or the thing or this oil or that or the meditation. So I think in the same way that we don't treat physical illness in the same way as mental health, when we see people suffering abuse, we tend to prioritize and think that someone suffering physical abuse is suffering more than someone who is suffering emotional abuse. And that is not always the case. That is not always the case. So we cannot really compare everyone, every human being, every individual has a unique, perfectly valid experience of abuse. Even if they never laid a finger on you, even if they never touched your skin or bruised your skin or break a bone, the experience of emotional and psychological abuse can be as harming and damaging as someone with a broken leg or a bruise or a black eye. I think it is a problem of perception that we see physical things as more severe or urgent, and they're easier to identify and even prosecute by the law. We tend to see physical harm more valid because it's more visible. I understand why, but we should move away from that narrative that someone that is only suffering emotional abuse is suffering less than someone who is going through physical abuse. And I see this in therapy as well when someone is kind of explaining their experience with their boyfriends, husbands, exes, and they're going through a massive long list of emotional abuse signs. And at the end they go, but he never punched me. He never touched me. He never laid a finger on me. And they just described like the whole list of, all the other things like threats, humiliation, criticism, manipulation, finance, control, all of the other signs. But at the end, they say, but he's not an abuser because he doesn't beat me up. And we need to re-educate people on that, like from the ground up. Like I find myself sometimes in therapy, like with my clients, just spending 45 minutes educating them on how emotional abuse is abuse. And not because he has never laid a finger on you, it means that he's not abusing you. And it does take time because sometimes they don't see their abusers as abusers.
That's true because it's not physical. It's something that it's internal. If people can't physically see it, then they don't think it's as abusive or as violent. So
Yeah.
we agree. How does healing from emotional abuse differ from physical abuse? And does it last longer or what are the long-term effects?
So healing from any either emotional and physical abuse, there's a lot of work to do around building and rebuilding your self-worth, your sense of self, your identity and processing trauma. It's recovering in every aspect of life possible because everything was hijacked: your sense of safety, perception of reality, your sense of self, the trust, your gut feelings, your trust in others, your trust in yourself. So the work, the healing, this kind of trauma with patients, with clients who've been through emotional and physical abuse kind of goes around rebuilding yourself, rebuilding from the ground up identity, self perception, self worth, self esteem, values, anything that has been completely hijacked and broken. Safety as well, rebuilding and training, retraining your brain again and your nervous system for safety, and finding safety and believing that you're safe in new environments. Because, yeah, as I was saying before, when someone has experienced this level of abuse, to the point where they feel unsafe everywhere they go, or just a noise or a movement can make them flinch, is retraining your brain and your nervous system to be safe and to find safety within your body, in yourself, and with the connections around you. So probably these people will have to also rebuild their friendships because some of them will be damaged, maybe. Some of them probably were not that great of a friend as well, because either they were not there to support, or they overlooked things, or they ignored things. So sometimes when there's a breakthrough like this, and they finally go to therapy, for example, they finally start to work on rebuilding things from the ground up, they do realize that some friends they might need to let go of. Not all of them, but sometimes they have this kind of breakthrough that some friends, well, they tried to ask for help, for example, but friends didn't help, for example. So at that point, yeah, building new connections, new communities, new hobbies, because I would say 99.9% of my clients who are suffering from emotional abuse have no hobbies or time outdoors, or any sort of sports activities. They have none of this happening. So it's rebuilding literally everything: friendships, hobbies, activities, community. So it's a long process. I'm not going to say this is an overnight thing because it's rebuilding a whole house in a way, but it's definitely possible, can be done.
I like the example that you just said. It's like rebuilding a house because you're rebuilding everything from the ground up. What you like, who you like to hang out with, where you like to go to relax. It's technically like building a house. I really like how you said that.
Yeah, from the ground up, literally from the ground up. Because probably everything that was going on before doesn't serve you anymore. So there's a lot of letting go of old things.
Yes, I
Mm.
agree. What are steps that friends, family, or society can take to better support victims of both types of abuse?
First of all, please believe, always believe them. Never try and slide your own bloody opinion that nobody ever asked for into the conversation. Like, believe them, like truly, truly, if they're saying they feel like this, never go, oh yeah, but he doesn't beat you up, right? Or that is not that bad. Like, or the same thing happened to my other friend. Just shut your mouth with your own opinions, experiences, and judgments, and fully and 100% listen and believe their story. Make them feel safe, because it's already unsafe enough for them to, one, live the life they're living, two, trying to live the life they're leaving behind, and three, open up about their struggle. And we add to the equation opening up to someone, and that someone not believing them, or not listening, or not being fully present, or judging. That is the worst thing. That is like the cherry on top for them, to believe that, see, like, one time I open up, there's one time I open up and I'm not listened, I'm not going to open up again. So we need to be better. As I said, we need to be better at listening to victims, believe their stories, no judgment, no opinions, no criticism, no. But can I give you my recommend? No, just listen and believe them. And once you've done that, once you've offered that safe space where they're fully listened to, heard, supported, ask them what they need. It's as simple as that. What do you need from me? Do you need me to go with you to the police? Do you need me to stay with you tonight? What do you need? Sometimes it's as easy as, I don't know, can you help me go grocery shopping because I'm completely exhausted? Ask them what they need. They might not be ready to fully initiate a process of uh, breaking up or going to therapy or going and report things to the police, but they might need your help in other areas like cooking or taking care of the children or hanging out because they need someone to talk to. So listen, don't judge, believe them, and ask them what they need. Don't assume what they need. They know what they need and be there. And sometimes they might not want your help. So remind them that when they're ready to take a step further, you're going to be there to support them, but never force them or push them to take any decisions. You might think that is the best option to go to the police now and report it now and do things now and take actions now, but they might not be ready for that. So just remind them that when they are ready for that, you're also going to be available and they can count on you for that as well. So ask them what they need.
I think those are all great tips on how to be there for somebody without forcing yourself in. Honestly, that question, what do you need? I think that also
Yeah.
helps open up vulnerability from the other person instead of just saying, what can I do? But instead of what, when you say, what do you need? It really opens up a whole like, conversation, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Sometimes they just need to sit down and cry or do nothing. Like really sometimes they're not really ready to do anything else. So what do you need? And they say I don't know, just sit down here in silence and or have a coffee or just cry. And that's perfectly okay if that's everything they need in that moment. They might feel progressively more and more ready to share more with you as long as you keep giving them this safe space to talk about things. But if you try and force them and push them in the first place, then they're gonna shut down and probably that's gonna be worse for them because they're gonna go about this situation on their own, isolated, and you might have lost the chance to help them because you wanted to help them so badly. I understand that you want to help them so badly that you're trying to kind of force your way into their lives and they might shut down and you might lose the opportunity to help them.
That is very true. Well, Martha, thank you so much for being here today and sharing all of your knowledge and all your tips. It's been super helpful. Tell us where people can support you and stay in touch with you.
So you can find me on Instagram at mindful and slow. You can connect. I do offer one-to-one sessions if this is something that someone listening resonated with and it's something that they want to work on. I do help people in this specific area. You can connect with me through my Instagram. Thank you so much for having me here today. I know it was a heavy topic, but I'm happy that we can get to have spaces to talk about these things without stigma and fully opening the spaces for other people who might need it. I hope it reaches at least one person that might need to hear this today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again. And I'll have your links where people can stay in touch with you linked in the description below. Thank you,
Well,
Martha.
thank you so much, Anita. Have a great day.